playing it in this spot. We flop a little bit of everything on it, and that's the problem with the hands for the most part. You get basically not a high quality entree, but a buffet. You get a little bit of everything, and it's low quality. We have bottom pair, a gut shot, and a 4-6 low draw. And when we get any action with this hand, each piece of our draw and each piece of our made hand is going to be dominated. So there is some equity we have here, and I'm just going to try to realize it by checking back. Now, on the turn king, we have a bet from the hijack, and we had somebody muck out of turn, which is always nice on the flop. So, again, we talked about how all strong hands, when there's low draws present, are going to want to bet for protection to charge the other low draws. So in this case, we can use that principle to basically eliminate all boats from his range. And we can also discount his King X hands as well, given that once checked to by two players, I think the vast majority of his kings are going to be betting. We can't completely remove them, given that he can definitely check and wait for an advantageous turn. That said, even if he does have a king, if we raise here, he's just going to be calling, and we do have considerable equity, given that on a 5 we can make the best high hand most of the time, and our low we can just check back and win the pot. That said, he's going to have a lot of other weak hands that are just going to have to fold the flop. The only problem with this raise is that we don't rep a whole lot, but I'm banking on the fact that most of these players won't be able to realize that, and they'll be playing mostly on the merits of their own hand. So I do go ahead and make the raise, and the player in the small blind, well, I guess big blind, calls quickly. And based on the same principle, I think we can squarely put him on nut low draw. The reason being, again, if he had a hand strong enough to merit for high to call a bet and a raise, namely King X or a boat, he's going to be wanting to bet either flop or turn. When he cold calls the bet and the raise, he's going to have a draw, and the only draw is ace 4, possibly ace 5. But to call a bet and a raise, I'm going to assume most of the time it's going to be it's going to be strictly just nut low draw. Now, it's kind of an interesting river, because on this river, if he had ace 4, he just made a pair of 4s, as did we, but he's going to have a better kicker than us, so he's going to win at showdown, scoop the pot. Now, we can ask ourselves if we want to bluff this river. If he has, we have to decide that, we have to consider his side cards. And if he has ace 4, 5, then certainly he's going to be calling at minimum. He'll have a wheel and nut low. But I think we can also remove that hand from his range, because on the flop that would be a wheel wrap and a very strong draw, something that he will be leading a lot, and on the turn even leading as well. So that's a hand that I'm not too worried about. Ace 4, 6 is the next best low draw. It is the next best low that he can make. And I expect that hand to call us if he has it. It will be second nut low, and our hand looks like a full house for the most part. So I would fully expect him to call if he has a 6 with his ace 4. However, we do block a 6 since we have one. And the next hand category is going to be ace 7. And I think that hand's probably going to be at the point where he's folding it. It's pretty speculative to call with an ace 7 low in a spot that he knows he's just going for half the pot. So if he has ace 7, I expect him to fold. If he has ace 8, certainly I expect him to fold. Now, that leads me to wanting him to bet. Sizing is worth considering here as well. I think his calling range is not very dependent on our sizing at all. I think it's just basically if he has ace 6, he's going to call. If he has worse, he's probably going to fold. So I think we can go on the smaller side because I don't think we need to waste any more money when he does have ace-6. In this case, he did have ace-6, and we get called as expected. And I think it's a good bluff overall, though he's going to have worse side cards with his ace-4. And as you saw, he did have ace-4-6. These pocket tens are not playable in this spot. They're a hand you could limp on the button, given that they have double suitedness and two very marginal low card side cards, but they do add some help to our hand when we do play it. But in that spot, definitely not playable. As it stands, we would have flopped fairly well with an open ender and a flush draw and a mediocre low. Table 2, a fairly strong holding, and we will be isolating that limp. A button call and a big blind 3-bet, and he's a short stack. He's essentially all in. If our hand was a little stronger and had a little more playability, I would opt to probably just flat and let the cutoff come in, and I wouldn't mind playing out of position. But in this case, we don't flop all that well, so I'm just gonna let just try to get heads up against the big blind. Now, if you look at his hand, it's by no means a bad 3-bet, but it is a hand that I'd probably in his spot opt to just flat call, and the reason is when he does flop well for high, it's going to be in the form of a flush or possibly a set. They're hands that are going to hold up multi-way, and he wants to have as much money go in as possible pre-flop in the form of multi-way. If he had a hand more like the ones we were playing earlier, like an ace, king, jack, deuce, things of that nature, those do better in heads-up pots where one pair or two pair is going to hold up, and if you start letting more and more players come in, your two pair can be overtaken by a straight or a flush. Table 1, when it's limped to us, this hand has enough connectivity. The ace-3 is strong, and the nut suit that I'm happy building the pot even out of position. So we flop quite well with trips. Our standard should be to bet here, but I end up opting to check. The reason being, if somebody else has a 3, they're going to be betting most of the time anyways. And it's a spot that when we lead, we're not going to get a whole lot of value from anything. If they have Jack X, it's even conceivable that they just fold, given that we will have some ace-3 combos, we can have aces, and they have to call with possibly players behind them. By checking, we let a low card to fall off a lot of the time, like it did here. And if you notice, a lot of the low cards will boat up on, so they'll be completely dead for high, namely on a 5 or a 6 or an ace. And not only will we boat up on a lot of them, but we will have a low draw ourselves that's quite good on a lot of them, as we do here, where we have second nut low draw. Now, another benefit to checking flop and betting turn when the low draw comes in is that our hand can now start to look like very little for high and just a low draw that we picked up. So now if they did have a jack that they checked on the flop, or if they had pocket queens or something like that, they can go ahead and make a call, hoping their high is good. We do get called by the small blind, and he only has $18 left, so we're clearly just going to be shipping it. But it's worth mentioning that we want to think about sizing at all times. So we've deemed his range to be either high hands that are hero calling, thinking that we have a low draw, or low draws himself. If he has one of his low draws, then then we're not going to get value from it no matter what, since it missed. On his high hand hero calls, we want to bet big and basically have a polarized range here of missed lows ourselves and strong high hands. And I think his calling range is going to be inelastic to our bet size here, and we're going to want to go full pot or close to it. Here it's really irrelevant since he has only $18 left, so we put him in. And we'll check what he showed up with. On table 2, we have a hand that's looks better than it is, but it's still open from the button. Okay, we check what he had. He had just a jack with no low draw, so a very, very light peel. He had no flush draw either. And, well, basically, we don't know if he would have folded flop or not, but definitely was a good outcome the way we played the hand. So we raise a button and we get called by the small blind. Now, we flop quite well. We flop open ender, deuce 3 low draw, backdoor flush draw. And something that's kind of a minute point but worth mentioning is that sometimes you'll see a hand like ace deuce deuce, or in this case deuce deuce 3, and you'll think you have some added benefit by the fact that you have 2 deuces in your hand, so you won't run into a duplicated low very often. And while that's true to some degree, the amount that having the small pair in your hand hurts your hand for high outweighs the benefits of running into the same low less often. I hope that made sense what I was saying. But here, in this particular flop, actually having the deuces doesn't hurt us much at all, because most of our high potential on this flop is coming from our open ender, and it doesn't involve pairing up our hole cards. It involves hitting a 6 or an ace. So it is quite nice, because now we discount how often he has ace deuce, discount how often he has deuce 3 for us getting 3/4. So I thought I would just mention that point. This is a hand that we can barrel on a lot of runouts, given that he doesn't have a lot of strong low draws. And this 7-7-3 deuce hand is a nice hand to see a flop cheaply with again. Reason being, when we flop a set, we will be guaranteed to at least have backdoor deuce 3 low draw, which is fairly strong. It's not a hand that does well heads up in a big pot, so once it gets ISO'd by the button, unfortunately we will have to fold. I believe we should fold. Doesn't mean I will, though. All right, there we go. Table 1, we open ace jack 4-10. And we get 3-bet. It was already a marginal open to start from that position. Given we have no nut suit, no nut low draw, just the ace 4, it's just going to be a fold. So that concludes the footage I have for this PLO8 series. I hope you learned some stuff and enjoyed the series. If you have any questions, please do start some discussion in the threads. And please also give me some input so I can better the next videos that come out, and also give me some ideas for things you want to see. I believe the next video I'll make will probably be one on PLO. And this is Zach Freeman. Thanks for watching.